The agreement when ambition meets desperation. The Hart writes contracts that logic never signed. This is a story about two souls who thought they could negotiate love like a business deal, only to discover that some things refused to be controlled. Rain drummed against the floor-tootling windows of the Manhattan high-rise, casting liquid shadows across the mahogany desk where Natalie Brooks sat, her hands trembling slightly as she held the pen. Across from her, Sebastian Hart watched with eyes the color of storm clouds, unreadable and distant. Sebastian was a man who had built an empire from nothing. At 38, he owned half the tech startups in Silicon Valley and had a reputation for turning failing companies into gold mines. His tailored navy suit fit him like armor, and his dark hair was styled with the kind of precision that suggested he controlled every aspect of his life down to the smallest detail. People called him brilliant. They also called him cold. Natalie was different. At 29, she had spent her life caring for others as a pediatric nurse, pouring warmth into a world that often felt harsh and unforgiving. Her chestnut hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her green eyes held a gentleness that seemed out of place in this office of steel and glass. She wore her best dress, a modest cream-colored piece that had seen better days. But she held her chin high, despite the circumstances that had brought her here. "The terms are clear," Sebastian said, his voice smooth but distant, like expensive whiskey served on ice. 1 year, a legal marriage, 1 child. At the end of the contract, you walk away with $750,000. Enough to clear your father's medical debts and give your sister the education she deserves. Natalie's throat tightened. Her father's cancer treatment had drained everything. The bills had piled up like accusations, each one a reminder that love couldn't pay for chemotherapy or hospital stays. Her younger sister Emma had been accepted to medical school, but couldn't afford to go. This money would change everything for them. It would save them. But the cost wasn't measured in dollars. "Why me?" Natalie asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "There must be hundreds of women who would agree to this." "Women in your world?" Sebastian leaned back in his leather chair, studying her with the intensity of someone evaluating a business investment. "Because women in my world want more than money. They want status, connections, a permanent place in my life. You want something simpler? You want to save your family? That makes you predictable, reliable." The words stung more than she expected. She was predictable. A woman whose entire existence could be reduced to a transaction. "And what do you get from this?" she asked, needing to understand the man who was asking her to sell a year of her life. "An heir," he said simply. "My grandfather built Hart Industries from the ground up. He's 86 now, and his dying wish is to see the family line continue. If I don't have a child by the time he passes, control of the company goes to my cousin, a man who will destroy everything my grandfather created. I won't let that happen." "You could find someone you actually love," Natalie suggested softly. Sebastian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Love is a liability I can't afford. It clouds judgment. It makes people weak. I learned that lesson a long time ago." There was a story behind those words, a wound that had never fully healed, but Natalie didn't press. She looked down at the contract again, her vision blurring slightly as she read. The clinical language that would govern the most intimate year of her life. The apartment would be provided. Medical care would be comprehensive. Public appearances would be required to maintain the illusion of a real marriage. Privacy would be respected. After the birth, custody would be sole and absolute. She would have no legal claim to the child. That last clause made her stomach turn. She would carry a baby for 9 months, feel it grow inside her, give birth, and then walk away as if it had never happened. Could she really do that? Could anyone? "I need to know something," Natalie said, lifting her gaze to meet Sebastian's. "Will you be a good father? Not just a provider, but someone who will actually love this child." For the first time, something flickered in Sebastian's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or maybe respect for the question. "I will give this child everything," he said carefully. "Security, education, opportunities. That's not what I asked." Sebastian was quiet for a long moment, the rain filling the silence between them. I don't know how to answer that, he admitted. And the honesty in his voice was more vulnerable than anything else he had said. Natalie took a deep breath. She thought of her father, weak and pale in his hospital bed, trying to smile when she visited. She thought of Emma, bright and passionate, whose dreams were slipping away because of circumstances beyond her control. She thought of herself and how little her own dreams had mattered in the face of their needs. "If I do this," she said slowly, "I have one condition that's not in the contract." Sebastian raised an eyebrow. "Go on. I want to be able to write letters to the child. Not to send, just to write. For myself, so that someday, if they ever want to know who I was, there will be something real. Something true." Sebastian considered this, his analytical mind weighing the risk. Finally he nodded. Agreed. "As long as they remain private, until the child is 18, Natalie picked up the pen. Her hand steadied as she signed her name on the dotted line, each letter feeling like a small surrender. When she finished, Sebastian signed as well. His signature bold and decisive. "Welcome to the arrangement, Mrs. Hart," he said, sliding the papers into a leather folder. "It's still Miss Brooks," Natalie corrected gently. "At least until the ceremony. Ceremony is scheduled for Friday at City Hall. My assistant will send you the details." Natalie stood, her legs feeling unsteady. This was real. She had just agreed to marry a stranger to have his child, and to walk away from both when the year was over. As she turned to leave, Sebastian spoke again. "Ms. Brooks." She paused, looking back. "Thank you," he said, and for just a moment. He looked less like a CEO and more like a man carrying a burden he couldn't share. Natalie nodded and left, the sound of her footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. Behind her, Sebastian remained at his desk, staring at the signed contract. He had gotten what he wanted. Everything was going according to plan. So why did he feel like he had just made the biggest mistake of his life? Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing over the city in sheets of gray. Somewhere between those droplets, two lives had just collided, bound together by ink and paper, with no idea that their carefully constructed walls were about to come crashing down. The unexpected connection. The penthouse apartment overlooked Central Park, a sprawling space of marble and glass that felt more like a museum than a home. Natalie moved through it carefully in her first week, afraid to touch anything, as if her presence alone might disrupt the perfect order Sebastian had created. Everything had a place. Books were arranged by height and color. Kitchen appliances gleamed, clearly unused. Even the art on the walls felt calculated, expensive pieces chosen by a decorator rather than someone who actually loved them. The only sign that anyone lived here was a coffee mug Sebastian left on the counter each morning. Always in the same spot, always rinsed but not quite clean. Sebastian himself was rarely there. He left before sunrise and returned after midnight, communicating through brief text messages that read like business memos. "Doctor's appointment confirmed for Tuesday at 10. Driver will take you. Dinner with investors Thursday evening. Attendance required." Or something formal. Natalie found herself talking to the empty rooms just to hear a voice. She unpacked her few belongings slowly, trying to make the guest bedroom feel like hers. She hung her mother's watercolor painting above the dresser, placed her worn copy of poetry beside the bed, and kept a framed photo of her father and sister on the nightstand. Small acts of rebellion against the sterile perfection. The medical appointments were clinical and uncomfortable. Doctors spoke about her body like it was a vessel, discussing hormone levels and optimal timing with the detachment of mechanics discussing an engine. Sebastian attended the first one, sitting rigid in a chair across the room, his presence both reassuring and suffocating. "Everything looks good," Dr. Morrison said. A woman in her 50s with kind eyes that couldn't quite mask the awkwardness of the situation. "We can proceed with the procedure next month." Procedure. Such a cold word for something that should have been intimate and meaningful. That night, Natalie couldn't sleep. She wandered into the living room at 2 in the morning and found Sebastian standing by the window, a glass of scotch in his hand. Staring out at the glittering city below. "I didn't mean to disturb you," she said softly. He didn't turn around. "You didn't. I don't sleep much. Neither do I, apparently." For a long moment, they stood in silence. Two strangers sharing space, but little else. Then Sebastian spoke, his voice quieter than she had ever heard it. Do you regret it? Signing the contract. Natalie moved closer, studying his reflection in the glass. I regret that it was necessary, but I don't regret trying to save my family. It's not the same as not regretting it. No, she admitted. It's not. Sebastian finally turned to face her, and in the dim light, she noticed the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. This was a man who carried weight that no amount of money could lift. Why don't you sleep? Natalie asked. Too many variables to control. You can't control everything. I can try. She smiled sadly. How's that working out for you? Sebastian's lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. You tell me? I'm standing in my own apartment at 2 a.m, drinking scotch and talking to a woman I barely know who's about to have my child. I'd say that control is slipping. The honesty caught her off guard. This was different from the man who had sat across the desk from her, all business and precision. This was someone real, flawed, struggling. Tell me something true, Natalie said impulsively. Not from the contract. Just something real. Sebastian considered this, swirling the scotch in his glass. I'm afraid, he said finally, that I won't know how to be a father. That I'll fail the way I've failed at everything that actually matters. What makes you think you've failed? Because everyone I've ever cared about has left. My mother died when I was 12. My father remarried a woman who saw me as an obstacle. My grandfather is the only person who ever believed in me, and he's dying. And I... He stopped, the words catching in his throat. Aunt. Natalie prompted gently. I was engaged once. Her name was Caroline. We were together for 3 years. She left a week before the wedding because she said I was married to my work. She said I didn't know how to let anyone in. She was right. Natalie's heart ached for him, this powerful man who had built walls so high he had trapped himself inside them. That must have hurt terribly. It was 5 years ago. I should be over it. Pain doesn't follow timelines, Sebastian. Neither does healing. He looked at her then, really looked as if seeing her for the first time. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone more practical, more detached. I am practical, Natalie said. I signed your contract, didn't I? But I'm also human. I can't just turn my heart off because it's inconvenient. I wish I had that problem, Sebastian said quietly. Without thinking, Natalie reached out and touched his arm. It was a simple gesture, barely contact at all, but Sebastian tensed as if she had struck him. Then, slowly, he relaxed. When was the last time someone touched you? She asked. Not a handshake or a professional courtesy. When was the last time someone just reached out because they wanted to offer comfort? Sebastian didn't answer, which was answer enough. Over the following weeks, something shifted between them. Sebastian started coming home earlier, often finding Natalie in the kitchen attempting to cook in a space clearly designed for show rather than function. She would burn things, set off smoke alarms, and laugh at her own mistakes with a lightness that seemed to fill the empty apartment with warmth. You don't have to do this, Sebastian said one evening. Watching her wrestle with a particularly stubborn pot. We have a chef on call, I know. But cooking reminds me of home, of my mom before she died. She used to say that food made with love tastes better, even if it's a little burnt. Did she burn things often? Constantly, Natalie grinned. We had smoke detectors that went off like clockwork every Sunday. Sebastian found himself smiling, an unfamiliar sensation. What are you making? Allegedly chicken parmesan. In reality, possibly charcoal. Can I help? Natalie looked surprised. Do you know how to cook? No, but I'm excellent at following instructions. They worked side by side, and Sebastian discovered that he liked the rhythm of it. The simple act of chopping vegetables while Natalie hummed softly. She didn't fill every silence with chatter. She seemed comfortable with quiet, which made her company peaceful rather than demanding. The chicken parmesan was indeed slightly burnt, but they ate it anyway, sitting at the dining table that had never been used for actual dining. They talked about small things, favorite books, childhood pets, the way the city looked different in the rain. I had a dog named Rusty, Natalie said. He was a golden retriever who was afraid of his own shadow. Emma and I used to pretend he was a lion, and he would play along, pouncing on imaginary prey. I never had pets, Sebastian said. My father thought they were too messy. That's sad. It was practical. Not everything has to be practical, Sebastian. Sometimes messy is good. Sometimes messy is real. He didn't argue, though he wanted to. Because sitting here with burnt chicken and easy conversation, he was starting to suspect she might be right. The medical procedure happened on a Tuesday morning in October. Natalie went alone, telling Sebastian she preferred it that way. The truth was, she needed to process this privately. Without his analytical presence making her feel like a science experiment, Dr. Morrison was gentle and professional. But Natalie still felt tears slip down her temples as she lay on the examination table. This should have been different. This should have been about love and hope, not contracts and money. When it was over, she went back to the penthouse and crawled into bed, pulling her mother's quilt around her like armor. She allowed herself to cry for all the things this wasn't. For the dream she had once had of how she would become a mother, she didn't hear Sebastian come home early. Didn't know he was there until she felt the bed dip slightly under his weight. Natalie. She turned, wiping her eyes quickly. I'm fine. Just tired, no. You're not fine. His voice was gentler than she had ever heard it. And you don't have to pretend you are. Something broke open inside her. This isn't how it's supposed to be, she whispered. Having a baby should be about joy and love, not medical procedures and legal documents. Sebastian was quiet for a long moment. Then, hesitantly, he reached out and took her hand. His palm was warm, his grip steady. I'm sorry, he said. I'm sorry this is the only way. I'm sorry I couldn't offer you something better. Natalie looked at their joined hands, this small bridge between two isolated islands. You're here now? That's something. He stayed with her until she fell asleep, his hand never leaving hers. And when he finally left the room, he stood in the hallway for a long time, staring at his palm as if the warmth of her touch had left a mark he couldn't erase. Everything was going according to plan. The procedure had been successful. The contract was being fulfilled. So why did it feel like he was standing at the edge of something vast and terrifying? Something that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with the woman sleeping in the next room. The truth about love, the pregnancy test, came back positive 3 weeks later. Natalie stared at the small digital screen in Dr. Morrison's office. The word pregnant, glowing like both a promise and a sentence. Her hands trembled as she set it down on the sterile counter. Congratulations, Dr. Morrison said warmly. Everything looks healthy. We'll schedule regular checkups to monitor progress. Natalie nodded, unable to speak around the tightness in her throat. She had known this was the goal, the entire purpose of the contract. But now that it was real, she felt unmoored. There was a life growing inside her, a tiny cluster of cells that would become a person. And she was supposed to walk away from it in a year. Like it meant nothing. Sebastian was waiting in his office when she returned to the penthouse. He looked up from his laptop, his expression neutral, but his eyes searching her face. Well, he asked. It worked. I'm pregnant. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, Sebastian stood, crossing the room in 3 long strides. He stopped in front of her, his hands hovering uncertainly before settling gently on her shoulders. Are you all right? The question surprised her. She had expected clinical satisfaction, maybe relief that his plan was proceeding on schedule. Instead, he looked genuinely concerned. I don't know, she admitted. This is what we agreed to, but now that it's happening, I feel so lost. Hey. Sebastian's hands tightened on her shoulders. You're not alone in this, aren't I? You'll have your heir. I'll have my money. But this baby will grow up knowing their mother chose to leave. That's not what happened, isn't it? I signed a contract. I agreed to this, because you had no choice, Sebastian said firmly. You did what you had to do to save your family. That doesn't make you a bad person, Natalie. It makes you human. She looked up at him. This man who claimed to have no capacity for emotion and saw something raw in his eyes, understanding, perhaps even empathy. Come here, he said quietly. pulling her into an embrace that felt nothing like a business arrangement and everything like comfort. Natalie let herself lean into him, breathing in the scent of his cologne mixed with coffee and something uniquely him. His heartbeat was steady against her ear, a rhythm that somehow made the world feel less chaotic. "We'll figure this out," Sebastian murmured into her hair. Together, it was the first time he had used that word. Together, as if they were partners rather than parties to a contract. The months that followed were a study in contradictions. Natalie's body changed slowly, her belly rounding with new life. And Sebastian found himself fascinated by the transformation. He attended every doctor's appointment now, sitting beside her and holding her hand during ultrasounds, watching the grainy black and white images of their child with an expression of wonder he couldn't quite hide. "That's the heartbeat," Dr. Morrison said during the 12-week checkup, adjusting the wand. The sound filled the room, rapid and strong, like a tiny drummer announcing its presence. Sebastian's grip on Natalie's hand tightened. "It's real," he whispered, more to himself than to her. "Did you think it wasn't?" Natalie asked softly. "I knew it intellectually. But hearing it, seeing it like this, it's different." After the appointment, they walked through Central Park despite the November chill. Natalie had started wearing looser clothes. Not quite maternity wear, but getting close. And Sebastian noticed how she would sometimes rest her hand on her stomach, a protective gesture that made something twist in his chest. "Tell me about your mother," he said suddenly. "You mention her sometimes, but I don't really know the story." Natalie was quiet for a moment, watching the bare trees sway in the wind. She was a teacher. Elementary school. 2nd grade. She loved children, loved seeing them learn and grow. She used to say that every child was a miracle waiting to unfold. "She sounds wonderful." Oh, she was. "And she got sick when I was 22. Breast cancer. She fought for 3 years, and she never complained, never felt sorry for herself. Even at the end, she was more worried about me and Emma than herself." "How old were you when she died?" 25. Emma was only 18. Dad tried to hold it together, but losing her broke something in him. He was never the same. Sebastian stopped walking, turning to face her. "Is that why you became a nurse? To help people the way you wished you could have helped her?" Natalie's eyes glistened. "Yes. I thought if I could save other people's mothers, daughters, fathers, maybe it would make her death mean something." "It already meant something," Sebastian said quietly. "She raised a daughter who cares so deeply about others that she'd sacrifice her own dreams to save her family. That's a legacy, Natalie." Tears slipped down her cheek, and Sebastian reached up to brush it away with his thumb. The gesture was tender, intimate, and it made Natalie's breath catch. "When did you get so wise?" she asked, trying to lighten the moment. "I'm not wise. I'm just learning from you." They started spending more time together, not because the contract required it, but because they wanted to. Sebastian began working from home several days a week, setting up his laptop at the dining table so he could be near Natalie while she read or knitted baby clothes, a hobby she had taken up with endearing incompetence. "It's supposed to be a hat," she announced one evening, holding up a lumpy blue creation that looked more like a deflated balloon. Sebastian examined it seriously. "It's abstract, very avant-garde. It's terrible. It's made with love. That counts for something." Natalie smiled, and Sebastian realized he would do almost anything to see that smile more often. The moment everything changed came on a snowy December evening. Natalie had been feeling restless, her energy returning after weeks of fatigue, and she convinced Sebastian to help her decorate for the holidays. "I know you probably hire people for this," she said, pulling boxes of ornaments from storage, "but I want to do it ourselves. It feels more real that way." They strung lights around the windows and hung ornaments on a tree that Sebastian's assistant had delivered. Natalie put on Christmas music, soft and nostalgic, and for a few hours, the penthouse felt less like a showroom and more like a home. Sebastian was hanging a silver star when he suddenly stopped, his hand frozen mid-reach. "What's wrong?" Natalie asked. "I just realized something." He turned to face her, his expression unguarded in a way she had never seen. "I'm happy. Right now, in this moment, I'm genuinely happy. And I haven't felt that in years." Natalie's heart stuttered. Sebastian, let me finish. He set down the star and crossed to where she stood. When I wrote that contract, I thought I could compartmentalize this. Keep it business, keep it simple. But you've made that impossible. I'm sorry, she whispered. You've shown me what I've been missing. How hollow my life had become. You walk into a room, and suddenly it feels warm. You laugh at your own terrible cooking, and it makes me want to laugh too. You touch my hand, and I remember what it feels like to be human instead of a machine designed to make money. Tears spilled down Natalie's cheeks. This wasn't supposed to happen. We had rules. I wrote because I was afraid. Afraid of feeling this. Afraid of losing control. He cupped her face gently, his thumbs wiping away her tears. But I'm more afraid of losing you. You can't lose me. I'm bound by contract. It's not what I mean, and you know it. I don't want you here because of ink on paper. I want you here because you choose to be. Because despite everything, despite how wrong this started, it's become the most right thing in my life. Natalie's voice broke. What are you saying? I'm saying I love you, Sebastian said, the words raw and honest. I love how you hum while you cook. I love how you talk to the baby like they can already hear you. I love your terrible knitting and your kind heart and the way you see good in me when I can't see it in myself. Sebastian, this is complicated. The baby, the contract, everything. I know. And I'm not asking you to decide anything right now. I just needed you to know the truth. That somewhere between the signatures and the doctor's appointments and the burnt dinners, I fell completely, irrevocably in love with you. For a moment, the world held its breath. Then Natalie reached up and pulled him down into a kiss that tasted of tears and truth and hope. It was soft and desperate all at once, a collision of everything they had been trying to deny. When they finally pulled apart, Natalie rested her forehead against his. I love you too, she whispered. I've been fighting it for months because I was so afraid of getting hurt, but I can't fight it anymore. Sebastian pulled her close, careful of her growing belly, and held her like she was the most precious thing in the world. Then don't fight. Let me love you. Let me be the man you deserve, the father our child deserves. Our child, Natalie repeated, the words settling over them like a benediction. If you'll have me. Not because of a contract, but because you want to build a life together. A real one, messy and imperfect, and full of the things that actually matter. Natalie laughed through her tears. Yes. 1,000 times yes. They stood there in the glow of the Christmas lights. Two people who had started as strangers and become something neither of them had planned for. Something real. Outside, snow continued to fall over the city, blanketing everything in white. And in that moment, wrapped in Sebastian's arms, with their child growing between them, Natalie understood that sometimes the best things in life are the ones we never see coming. The ones that slip past our defenses and remind us that we were never meant to live alone. Love, she realized, wasn't a liability at all. It was the bravest investment anyone could make, and she and Sebastian were finally ready to risk everything on it.